Hey guys, welcome to the Liberal Hive Mind, a channel solely focused on exposing the abundant hypocrisy of the left. Well, exactly as expected, it's happening, folks. John Fetterman hasn't budged in the polls for months. He's been under that 50-point line for a real long time, and he just hasn't been able to break through that ceiling. Well, folks, it seems as though that ceiling is dropping, and we haven't even seen the real impacts of that MSNBC expose as of yet. I mean, we're seeing little remnants of it, but it's really going to take some time to materialize. But the simple fact of the matter is John Fetterman's campaign is crashing, and the most recent Trafalgar Group poll not only shows John Fetterman's lead reducing, but it shows Dr. Oz catching up, and he's essentially within the margin of error, and that doesn't even account for independents and undecided voters who are most likely going to split for him, and the voter enthusiasm gap. Of course, I'm not going to rehash those points because we've done all the polling analysis, but the basic point here is that John Fetterman continues to crash, and Dr. Oz is gaining on him. It's exactly what we were expecting, considering all the bad news and the bad moves that the John Fetterman campaign has been making. We've been reporting that they are in serious panic mode. Well, folks, that panic mode just turned into an emergency declaration as the Fetterman campaign is straight up freaking out. And boy, oh boy, when you get emotional, when you get desperate, sometimes you don't exactly make the most sound of decisions. And John Fetterman's campaign, this time through his wife, just made a serious blunder. Let me show you guys exactly what's going on as the Fetterman campaign continues to tank. I mean, this is 2 weeks straight of PR blunders and campaign disasters. Of course, we've got some stuff to get into. Let me show you guys everything that's going on, so let's roll the tape. All right, folks, so let's first start off with the numbers here. John Fetterman's campaign is officially tanking. In the most recent Trafalgar poll, his ceiling drops down to 47.2%. Dr. Oz gains at 44.8%. That's a 2.4% lead for John Fetterman, right within the margin of error. Then you have 4% undecided and 3.4% for the Libertarian candidate, I believe, Eric Gerhardt. And so clearly the question is a 2.4% lead for John Fetterman enough to win in Pennsylvania? Considering the undecided split, considering the fact that the Libertarian candidate might not get 3.4%, and of course the most important factor, people actually showing up to the polls. I don't think so. I mean, if you look at the most recent Rasmussen poll, where Republicans make massive gains in generic congressional ballot data, specifically isolated for the state of Pennsylvania, Republicans are leading in generic ballot votes at 48% to 43%. And if we look at independents across the country, 2022 generic congressional ballot polling trends by Rasmussen, on September 29th, it was 38% for Democrats, 37% for Republicans. Fast forward 2 weeks later, Republicans hold a plus 16 lead at 46% to 30% for the Dems. Considering the fact that Pennsylvania voters are leaning rightward, how the heck does it then make sense for Pennsylvania voters to then go and vote for John Fetterman? Not only is he one of the most far-left candidates currently running, but to add insult to injury to make it even worse, he's unhealthy, and Pennsylvania voters know that, and increasingly so after the most recent MSNBC report. Clearly, it's not looking good for John Fetterman's campaign, and they know it. And now, as I was mentioning after that MSNBC piece, the expose into John Fetterman's health, well, the emotional and desperate reaction from John Fetterman's wife and his campaign is another campaign PR blunder, disaster. John Fetterman's wife just came out publicly claiming that Dasha Burns, the reporter who broke the story on John Fetterman's fitness for office or lack thereof, should, quote, face consequences after going live with the piece.
I don't like saying rage because I think that's a really unhealthy feeling. And when you feel those things, it only harms yourself. But I just, what a disservice that she did to not only my husband, but to anyone facing a disability and working through it. And I don't know how there were not consequences, right? I mean, there are consequences for folks in these positions who are any of the isms. I mean, she was ableist, and that's what she was in her interview. It was appalling to the entire disability community, and I think to journalism. So I was shocked. I'm still really upset about it. And I think the positive is it's brought a lot of conversations around accommodations, around rights, around ableism, right? I mean, ableism was trending on Twitter. It just shows there's so much work to do, but these networks have to take accountability, right? Like, where is your training?
Right.
It was appalling to see. And you see that in schools, you see that with young children. You don't expect to see it at this level. And, you know, I haven't heard an apology. It hasn't come. I am hopeful that, you know, they will reflect and see that they did an incredible disservice to all Americans.
Oof, now that is not only appalling, but it's also just so cringy. Ableism, taking the disingenuous woke approach to call for consequences against Dasha Burns, who was merely doing her job and reporting on basic facts. Her stance is that Dasha Burns did a disservice to the voters and viewers by honestly and openly reporting on the clear facts of John Fetterman's health. That's the stance that you want to take? I mean, I wouldn't advise it. I'd advise against it. I'd say that's probably not a good idea. But if that's what you believe, then fine. But then for John Fetterman's wife to suggest that she should face consequences for practicing journalism gives us a direct view into the mind of an authoritarian leftist. And then of course to justify it with some woke nonsense, once again gives us a direct view into what Dr. Jordan Peterson is always warning us about with the compassionate leftist authoritarian. It's just not a good look, and it's similar to what we're seeing with Katie Hobbs. This idea that voters don't deserve to see the truth about their candidates. It's all just completely ridiculous, and it's clearly going to backfire. It's a really bad look. People are already discussing this clip, and the overwhelming majority of the comments that I'm seeing, of course this is anecdotal, find her statements to be completely absurd, ridiculous, and I'd say rightfully so. But at the end of the day, it all signals one thing: total, absolute, sheer panic coming out of the John Fetterman house and of course the John Fetterman campaign. They don't know what to do, they're scrambling, and it's everybody but John Fetterman that's speaking for John Fetterman, which makes the optics even worse. John Fetterman can't even come out publicly and defend himself because of the damage that he has suffered after the stroke. The whole thing is falling apart, and you know that they're getting seriously desperate when they're launching a last-minute Hail Mary desperate attempt to turn this thing around by calling on Joe Biden to campaign for John Fetterman. It's happening. Dementia Joe will go to Pennsylvania to stump for stroke victim John Fetterman. I mean, honestly, with this one, the jokes write themselves. I think I'm going to refrain on this issue specifically, but let's just say John Fetterman and Joe Biden, not exactly an all-star lineup when it comes to public events, public speaking. This is, as I stated, a last-second, last-ditch effort. This is pure desperation, and again, I think it's going to flop. Very simply because Joe Biden is incredibly unpopular in the state of Pennsylvania, and even more unpopular with independent voters that you're currently trying to convince. Trump leads Biden in Pennsylvania 2024 poll. Donald Trump is beating Joe Biden by a staggering amount in Pennsylvania across all of the most reputable pollsters. And John Fetterman's strategy here to turn this around, or the Fetterman campaign strategy, is to bring Sleepy Joe to resurrect his campaign. Again, not a good look. It's PR blunder, campaign blunder after blunder. From the crime campaign that backfired on John Fetterman tremendously, trying to brand himself as a law and order candidate, and then everything in between to now this, John Fetterman's election efforts are spiraling out of control. And pretty soon, folks, the whole thing's going to implode. I don't see this guy winning on election day, and certainly not after the late October debate. But of course, we'll just have to see what happens. I mean, really, the ball's in Dr. Oz's court. We'll just have to see what he does with it. But when it comes to John Fetterman, it's been airball after airball. One big, massive disaster. That's what I got for you guys, though. If you enjoyed it, make sure to leave a like and possibly subscribe to the channel if you guys are up for it. Like usual, though, I gotta get back to work. I want to thank you guys for watching, and I will see you on the next one.